Um, so I wondered if we could just go back a little bit and talk about when you first started writing recipes for an audience for the Guardian newspaper. And when you were asked to do the vegetarian column, you weren't a vegetarian chef, right? You're known for vegetables. And maybe tell me a little bit, what were your thoughts about having to commit to the vegetarian lane?
Yeah. Well, I speak about it in the introduction to the book Plenty More. And in a sense, I was slightly petrified, but for various reasons. First of all, I thought, well, my biggest fear was that I would be pigeonholed as a vegetarian chef. And in the world of cooks and chefs, at least a few years ago, cooking vegetables was not very high on the priority list. Serious chefs, they cook meat, right. And kind of the not so serious chefs, they cook vegetables. And I'm simplifying it, but that's a little bit of, there's a hierarchy, and I didn't want to be down the bottom, or perceived to be down at the bottom. And the other worry that I had was that I was thinking that I've never written recipe for a living. I've been cooking for many years, but I was worried that I was run out of suitable ideas to share with my Guardian readers every week. I thought, oh God, I literally thought that I've got about 4, 5, 6 ideas, and then I'm just going to run out. I won't have any more recipes to write. And I think one of the reasons, it was I think it was a writer's anxiety. Mm-hmm. It's my one and only writer's anxiety. I didn't know what it feels like, but that's what it felt like at the time. So I was slightly worried about that. And what I write in the introduction to the book is, in a sense, I was proven wrong on both fronts. My first concern has actually, the roles have almost reversed in the last few years. I can't take credit for this myself, but I'm probably part of this change that has been occurring, that cooking grains and legumes and lentils and all those wonderful things has become much more appreciated, looked up to, and desirable on all levels of cooking. Right. Fancy restaurants, people at home, everybody wants to cook more vegetables and wants to do marvelous things with vegetables. And you can go to the high end, to the Nomas of this world, and to the Nordic cuisine, which focuses very much on foraging and local vegetables. Mm-hmm. And you can go anywhere, and you'll see that all of a sudden the vegetables have really moved to the center. Mm-hmm. And that's a great thing. And I think we all know there's various reasons for that. I think the most important at this point in history is the fact that eating vegetables has just become something that we can just about imagine that this world will be able to support, and other ways of nurturing ourselves may not. And with the fear or the anxiety of running out of ideas, I think I found myself opening myself up to the world of food and all sorts of weird and wonderful places through reading, engaging with people, and traveling. Mm-hmm. And I have been obsessing about all sorts of wonderful places in the world: Turkey and Iran and the Far East, Malaysia and Vietnam, and all the places that I feel have something in common with my Middle Eastern background, the same kind of sensibilities when it comes to food. So I've been celebrating vegetables ever since, and put my anxiety to the side.
Has working on the vegetarian recipes you feel like has it changed your palate? Has it changed the way you cook and the way you think about creating a dish?
I think it has. First of all, I really enjoy being limited. Mm-hmm. I enjoy the challenge of being limited, of creating wonderful flavors without the help of a bone or an anchovy, or all those things that have kind of intense meaty flavor in them and are really good solutions for cooking and infusing flavor. We all know, many of us at least know that, how effective a bone is to make a stock, or how fantastic all these umami flavors are. But with vegetarian cooking, you've got an extra challenge to infuse things with those flavors. Hence, I use a lot of techniques that involve smoking. Mm-hmm. And when I say smoking, it's not that kind of fancy smoking. I mean just putting something on a griddle pan with a lot of oil, and hence you get quite a lot of smoke. around whatever you're grilling, you're smoking, using tons of herbs and spices and putting things in conjunction with other things that really manage to infuse them with flavor. So I think what I realized is with vegetables, you just need to work a little bit harder.
Yeah. You talked about traveling a little bit or the different places you take inspiration from. I wonder if there's a sort of, is there a region of the world or a cuisine that's you find particularly inspiring right now that you've been thinking about a lot or looking
With
to?
this book in particular, I'm very focused on the Persian food, Iranian food. I think it's a part of the world that hasn't been discovered yet. Well, it has been discovered by many. It's not fair what I said, but it hasn't been exposed massively yet to a big audience in the West. And it's the most wonderful cuisine that focuses a lot on ingredients that I just love, things like saffron, pomegranates, walnuts. The Persians, they make the best rice in the world. Forget any other rice and go and cook Persian rice, because the way they cook it is based on the rice steaming with its own residual water that's left through parboiling. And the result is really magnificent. They're really separate grains of rice. Each one is separate. And they're absolute magicians in making crusty rice, cooking that
Isn't there a name for there's a special name, right? There's a name for
Tahdig is the name for that. And then many Iranian cooks pride themselves on the quality of their tahdig, that kind of crispy thing that many of us would treat as an accident, but for them it's a very desirable accident. You know, it happens every time. You really want it to happen because everybody is just grabbing out to pull that bit of the rice that's stuck and burnt a little bit on the bottom of the pan. And there's various ways to enhance that.
Yeah. In Plenty, there was a few ingredients which are, spices that you won't go back to a lot that I think were probably new to a lot of American cooks, like sumac or like pomegranate molasses. And I'm curious if in the new book, were there sort of some like motifs, these things that you were going back to a lot and using that might be new to people?
Yeah, there's a bunch of new ingredients in Plenty More that I've been discovering and cooking with over the last few years. There's quite a few, but I will mention a couple. One of them is black garlic, which I don't know how many of you are familiar with black garlic, but black garlic essentially is just normal garlic that's gone through a process of aging over a few weeks in under certain conditions and a certain temperature. And it's actually a technique that's been developed in Korea. It's new, but it creates the most fantastic condiment ingredient to use in dressings, in marinades, and in stews. Basically, the garlic cloves turn from white to black, and they have they take on the flavors of what I can describe as cocoa or licorice or chocolate or even coffee. And lose all their garlickiness. It's a real transformation.
So it's like a controlled rot, like
yeah. It's like all those wonderful things that we love to eat, like wine, like all sorts of things that are absolutely delicious because of the aging.
Right.
So that is one ingredient that I'm obsessed with at the moment. Another ingredient that I like a lot, it's in one of the recipes, is called kadaifi. It's a type of Arabic pastry. Essentially, it's a bit like shredded wheat in texture, or like angel hair pasta, but it's phyllo pastry. It's very easy to work with, and it's got the most unusual texture. Normally in Arabic cuisine, it's used to make baklavas and all sorts of desserts, but I use it in a savory context. It's stuffed with a cheese and burnt eggplant filling, and then it's turns into little nests. And those are put in the oven brushed with butter and served with a Spanish tomato sauce that I came up with. But the beauty of it is that it's extremely easy to work with. You don't need to roll it out. All these people with the pastry angst should go and try to seek out this Lebanese or Turkish, or you can get it from many shops, pastry. It's very hard to fail. You need to be really rotten if you're going to fail in that. Yeah, it's kind of, everybody can do it.
One thing you write about in I guess it was the second book here, which was Jerusalem, a lot that I thought was interesting was about the sort of the ownership of dishes and how different cultures and different groups in Jerusalem and Israel claim ownership in dishes. And I would say I mean, it's interesting, and I think in the U.S. it's maybe like a little foreign to us. We don't have, it's not like there's one person who says, you know, I own the hamburger or I own fried chicken, and I mean, there are people who have, you know, a lot of pride, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, about some of that debate over the ownership of like dishes.
It's something I'm thinking about quite a lot because I am, the moment I'm trying to understand a little bit about the connection between food and identity, because lots of my travels and investigations lead me towards this relationship between food and identity. And I think in what we call developed countries, but I don't think developed is the right description, but it's just a way to kind of bundle them all together. The connection between food and identity is, I think, somehow has been severed. Or it just doesn't exist as much as it used to be. For various reasons, industrialization, we all live in cities. I mean, that what we cook is much less related to what our elders have cooked for us, etc. But when you go to, and I've made a few programs for Channel 4 in the UK where we've been traveling around the Mediterranean and into all sorts of places, Tunisia, Morocco, Turkey, and try to figure out, understand the food through its functions, and I realized that it has essentially the common denominator to many of the examples of what I've seen is the issue of identity. And when an identity in these parts of the world is slightly shaky or is slightly in threat, then you kind of hang on to what you like or what you know or what you think will keep your identity. Hence, what you were talking about, the sense of ownership. When the existent is kind of haphazard and not safe, you hang on to the things that are very important to you and define you. And I think food is extremely important in Israel and Palestine because the reality is very shaky. So people are very happy to take ownership or are very willing or even willing to fight for the ownership of something that proves that they have the right to exist in a certain way or in a certain place or over a certain land. And I think that comes when writing the book Jerusalem, which was a fascinating experience, and I love doing it. But you often come across this area where you really need to tiptoe and make sure that you don't take something from one side by describing it as the food of the other side. If you see what I mean, that is a very crucial thing. And but it happens in other places. A Turkish coffee and an Arabic coffee and a Greek coffee are essentially the same. But watch out, if you say Arabic coffee in Turkey, they'll chop your head off.
I mean, in related is, and I love you talk in Jerusalem about the hummus debate, and I have to admit I wasn't aware that there were sides in this, and maybe you could talk about, like, you know, there's the chunky versus the smooth, and there's the ratio of tahini to chickpeas, and
and how much lemon juice goes in, and whether there's garlic, and sometimes people put cumin in. That is just an extension of the point that I was making, and in a sense, hummus is like the national dish of both Israelis and Palestinians. So very comfortable that warring sides share a national dish. I mean, it's not a good starting point, but it's also a good. But on the other hand, it's a very telling thing. I mean, it just shows how close the sides are in many ways. So the what I call the hummus wars are the two-faceted kind of wars. There is the one word war is maybe the war is a bit of a strong word in this context, but I see it a bit like that. Is about ownership, and that is when you ask who was the first to make hummus, and of course the Arabs, whether they're around the region, whether they're Jordanian, Palestinian, Lebanese, Syrian, would say us. And I don't think that is very debatable that that is the case. But then the Jews in Israel tend to say, but that's not entirely true, because if you could read in the Old Testament, and there is this story where something should be interpreted as hummus, although we're not sure it's hummus. And then you kind of, this in Judaism, we can say a million things just and debate them quite a lot without ever reaching a conclusion. So there are those kind of arguments that claim that hummus was in the Bible. But even if it wasn't in the Bible, and even if Esau and Moses didn't eat hummus, there is one thing that you can agree on is that Jews that were living in the Arab world for millennia
Right.
have been eating hummus, and then it's very hard to say that hummus is Muslim and not Jewish because the cultures were interacting. So this is the historical debate. That's one aspect. The other aspect is, and that's much less serious and much more fun, is that who makes the best hummus?
Right.
But
Or how do you like it?
or
right?
how do you like it? And then that becomes like a matter of a tribe. You know, I go to this restaurant and I've been going it all those years, and he's been making it in a certain way, and you're stupid to think that anyone else could make it any better. And then you've got a lot of these, I call it skirmishes, you know, little wars, and where two shops or two restaurants fight on who makes the best hummus and
Right.
why. And again, like you said, it's a matter of texture, it's a matter of balance, it's a matter of this. And grown-up men can have serious arguments about normally it's men, because women are more sensible, have terrible arguments about where's the best place to have hummus, and lose friendships over this
Right.
subject.
So what's your answer? Where is the best place, and how do you?
I'm going to have to sit on the fence on this one. No, I mean, there's a couple of places in the old city of Jerusalem that have been making hummus in a very traditional way for many, many generations.
Right.
Abu Shukri is one of them. It's in the old city, in the Arab part of Jerusalem, that makes a good one. And Lina is another one. They're all kind of follow the same Jerusalem Palestinian tradition of hummus, which is warm-ish, very, very smooth, and quite acidic with lemon juice or citric acid if they're cheating. And that's a very particular hummus, and it's a meal.
Right.
Most people don't know that hummus is not something you eat from a tub. It's something you eat warm, for your breakfast or lunch with a pita, and it's cooked to serve and then thrown away. It's not a condiment. It's not coleslaw.
It's not coleslaw. Maybe tell me a little bit, just from reading the introduction of the book. So your first cookbook, or when you were doing the Guardian column, you were doing all these recipes in your kitchen, right?
Yes, at home.
Right, and now you've doing this so long that you have like an R&D studio, like a test kitchen, a test lab.
I've turned into a mini empire, a bit like Google. Yes, I used to test every single recipe myself, which is kind of fun, but also a lot of hard work, because I used to go and shop and come back and taste the recipe and clean up and do the washing and then sit and write it. And it meant that I could do like 2 recipes a day.
Right.
And then with the years, I started to have to write more recipes and publish more books. So eventually, I took on a little industrial space under a railway arch in central London, where I have my test kitchen. And that's where things are happening. And I figured that it's actually a much better way to create recipes to work in a team. The whole of Plenty I did on my own. The whole of Plenty More was done in a team. And I think you get a much more, how would I put it, a much more kind of diverse understanding of the food and a better picture. And sometimes the discussions or the arguments about what a certain dish lead into something much better. So now I'm much more of a collaborator than I ever was.
Yeah. Do you prefer being sort of more of a cookbook author than actually being in the kitchen and on the line?
Nowadays I find it very relaxing. I just sit there and write my ideas, and someone does all the chopping up, and then I just need to come at the right moment and put it all together. It's much easier. But just being a bit more serious about this, there is the joy of actually cooking the activity of cooking is very different from the activity of making recipes.
Right.
And when you cook, it's a visceral, hands-on activity where you kind of judge things all the time with your hands, with your eyes, with your mouth. When you think up recipes, it's almost like an intellectual exercise. You constantly think that might. So sometimes when these two come together, they don't do that very well. They're not best friends. So what seemed like a great idea on paper just doesn't work in reality. So it's quite important for me to be on both fronts. It's like it's not like architecture where you can design a building and let the engineers, break their heads over it. I need to be there to make sure that the idea actually works and comes together.
Now, Is that what led you from, you were on a path to academia towards getting a PhD. Did you go into the kitchen because you wanted to work with your hands? Was that it?
Yeah, first of all, when I started to cook, I felt a sense of liberation because I actually realized that I turned into a mini slave to my academic life. I used to come home and, fret over what I haven't done that day. Haven't read this article, haven't done this, haven't done that. With food, it's once you're done, you're done. Once you've cooked or fed a group of people or your family or whatever, it's finished. Mm-hmm. And it's a very nice feeling to have that you've finished your chores for the day. I don't know if you know it, but the feeling that it's all done and dusted, that's it, I'm going home, right. Which is what happens after you've done service in a restaurant is, even though you work really hard physically, it's actually a great feeling. Mm-hmm. Then you can just not think, right. Which is a nice thing.
Mm-hmm. I saw this tweet that you wrote recently, and I thought it was very funny. I'll read it out loud. It said, "Tofurkey vegan gluten-free pizza makes me sad." You tell me what was the context there?
Well, someone tweeted that picture of some monstrosity of a supermarket pizza that was made out of tofu to taste like turkey, and be vegan.
Right.
So essentially, it was like so many wrong things put in one box. First of all, a pizza that is not a pizza, a turkey that is not meat that is not meat, and tofu made to replace dough. I mean, for me, I'm not a purist, so as you probably know, I play around with ideas and with recipes, and I mix a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But there's some things that are just not done. And one of them is try to imitate one food with the other. Like, I can't stand veggie burgers.
Right.
When you take bean and make them look as much as possible as a piece of hamburger or meat. And I asked myself, why? Because the vegetables are so fantastic. Why would you want to turn them into a burger? Mm-hmm. I mean, beans are so great. You take beans and you put some lemon juice and garlic and chopped parsley, maybe cilantro, and that's the most delicious thing. And then you put them in the food processor with all sorts of things that make them look brown, and then you fry them on the outside. And that's just, for me, it's got all the wrong things in the world. I mean, I respect vegetarianism and I respect veganism and I respect lots of things, but I think there's so many options without trying to make one thing taste or look like something else. It doesn't work.
Yeah. I think we'll open it up to questions, though. My one last question is that, are you going to open an Ottolenghi in New York?
I've answered this question so many times, but with the word New York, that could have been another city. I am terribly, I'm a terrible control freak, and I find it very difficult to let go. And hence, I cannot work like other cooks and open restaurants all over the world. We're a close team of partners that work like that, and we visit our restaurants all the time, and it would be very expensive if I had to come to New York every time I wanted to taste my butternut salad. So I'm afraid it's a no.
It's a no. All right. Just have some questions.
Hi.
Hi.
I don't know if this is really short. Thank you so much for coming. I think your books have always been an inspiration for me, just in terms of vegetarian cooking. I was raised vegetarian, even though I'm no longer a vegetarian. My mother is a practicing Chinese Buddhist, and part of the culture is to not eat any living thing, but as well, on top of that, things that are kind of pungent in nature, so that when you're, in prayer, you're not supposed to have like lingering scents of food. So one challenge that I have is I have to cook for her without any garlic or anything in the onion family. So apart from the things that you've mentioned, like cumin and other spices, what other kind of flavoring ingredients do you think are a top favorite that is outside of those two things?
You can really take quite a lot of things out of your cooking because I think there's so much to substitute. One of the ingredients that I use a lot in such situation is miso, which is a natural fermentation of soybeans or barley or whatever it is that is being used. in that particular miso, and it adds a lot of flavor, and it comes in all sorts of varieties with different types of intensity, and I think it adds a lot. I mean, it's never going to turn into an onion or a garlic, and you should never try to turn it into an onion. Hence what I said earlier. I don't think you should try this, but it has a lot of flavor. I think the idea of not having onion or garlic is, it doesn't linger. So in a sense, maybe in those situations, you do want to make something that is slightly more bland. I mean, that's just, otherwise it's kind of cheating your religion, isn't it? If you're going to do something that is not onion garlic, but is similar. But I think there's so many things out there that I would just choose something that works without those ingredients. I mean, it's possible.
Try to push our envelope a little bit,
Yes.
just to, because there are vegetarian restaurants out there that is like, here's a fake beef stir fry, and
It's all wrong. It's all wrong. I think if you go to Asian hawker center market where all this wonderful stuff, or eat Middle Eastern meze, you can pick a dozen things that are vegan or vegetarian, and they've got tons of flavor, and you don't need to think about meat or yogurt or all those things that are not consumed by some, and you never feel that you miss them. Once you've started putting into your head that you have to have something like something you can't have, that's where everything starts to go wrong, in my mind.
Ooh, that's great advice. Thank you.
Over here.
Hi, thanks so much for coming. You talked a bit at the start about how, I guess, more developed nations, as you referred to it, don't really have to cling on to the foods from past generations and kind of appropriate foods from whatever sources we want. I guess taking that to an extreme, do you see a danger in maybe kind of what's happened with hummus, what you described, like, it just becomes almost commodified and it just becomes very generic and you can buy it in a store? Like, do you see any risk from taking these very authentic foods, kind of popularizing them in your cookbooks, and are we going to see McDonald's serving pomegranate dipping sauce for their chicken McNuggets and stuff?
It's the first I hear of that. Yes, of course, this is the risk. The smaller the world becomes, the more we live in cities, the less you're going to find ancient traditions preserved in such a way, and everything is commodified and turned into something that is easy to produce and easy to consume. I don't think there's much we can do about it, but the one thing that I think you can see the two opposite trends working at the same time. While we want to have hummus on the shelves in our supermarkets, there is also at the same time a real yearning for the proper thing, the real thing. So you'd find a little joint in somewhere that people kind of are willing to queue for hours to get the authentic experience. So I don't think they necessarily mean the extinction of old ways of doing things. I'm sure we're going to see less of them. They're going to become more of a curiosity. But there's something about modernizing, whatever that means. That means you're going to see a little bit less of what is being modernized, and that is a sad fact. But I don't think there's that much we could do. The one thing I would say, again, is that one of the good things that come out with this intense interest in food that we've seen over the last 20 years, on television and just in people's lives, is that there is, I think, a real yearning to things that as they used to be and as they should be, and hence, people do write books or open restaurants or go on pilgrimage to proper places, and I think that's still going to stay.
Thanks.
Over here.
I first wanted to say that it's been really great having your cookbooks. I'm a vegetarian, and my mom loves to cook, and it's been a really big challenge for her to figure out what to make for me and my partner over the years for holidays like Thanksgiving and stuff. So you presented her with a really good challenge and me with some really good food since they came out. And I'm also really excited about the new book. I have a lot of Persian Jewish friends and tend to eat a lot of Sephardic type cuisine, so that'll really add to that experience as well. My question is a little bit silly but fun. I'm going with my parents to your restaurant in Islington in December. And is there one thing, if anything, on the menu that you would recommend that we get, since it's a special experience because of that bonding?
The trouble is I don't know what's going to be on the menu in December because the menu changes. So it will be difficult, but I think you're going to find that the menu is quite small. It's composed from about 16 dishes. So you're going to have to probably, being vegetarian, you're going to have to concentrate on the vegetables, and there's about probably 10 vegetarian dishes on the menu. So, and it's sharing, so you probably just order all of them.
I'm down for that. Thank you.
Actually, when you're in New York, are there things you come here that you feel like you love that you get in New York that you can't find good versions of in London? Or is London cosmopolitan enough now that you have barbecue and pizza just like
Yeah, no, it's not that New York is by no means. I mean, it's got its own sense of food identity. You know, there's no Jewish delis in New York, in London, or there. So there is certain things you can only get here, and a few other things that it's not everything. No, I can't get everything I want.
Yeah. Another question?
So you were talking before about ingredients that people may not be familiar with that you expose in your cookbooks. Personally, I started cooking with kohlrabi a lot more after reading your cookbooks, which I really enjoy. But I was wondering, is there a technique that you think is really underused by home cooks that you think people should be learning more?
I'm really happy you're asking this question, because I think what makes Plenty more special in relation to the other books is that the focus on technique. The chapters are divided. The book is divided into chapters according to cooking method or cooking technique, steamed, roasted, grilled, and so on and so forth. And the reason why I decided to do it this time this way is because I felt that there is a lack of understanding as to how crucial it is what you do with vegetables. And I think that knowledge is to most people quite natural when it comes to meat and when it comes to fish. You know, fish you cook very lightly. You know, you grill them and you kind of don't mess about with them. Not many fish are good for long cooking. Meat is slightly different. You know, the prime cuts you eat, seared or almost raw, and the cheap cuts you stew, et cetera, et cetera. So we have that kind of understanding, and I gave him an example in the introduction about the fact that if the steak is not to our liking, we send it back because we know what a steak should be like. And I really don't think the same applies to vegetables. So I've decided to take the recipes, which are not different in a dramatic way from Plenty, but I decided to divide them according to the main cooking technique, because I wanted to draw attention to the fact that it really is crucial what you do with a vegetable. So I'll take vegetables as an example, vegetables that are probably maybe it's not a tomato or eggplant, which are kind of sexy. I'll take the not so sexy vegetables like a Brussels sprout or a turnip or a cauliflower, and give you an example. I mean, with a Brussels sprout, most people that I know up until recently just threw it into boiling water and cooked it, and maybe just added some bacon later or something. And this book offers like tons of ways to cook Brussels sprouts, but to boil them or overboil them, as many people do. You know, roasting and grilling and eating raw as in a salad, and deep frying for a risotto. And there's a lot of ways or serving as a salad. The Brussels sprouts are not loved, I think, not because they're not good. It's just because they're really badly cooked normally. So I tried to take something like that and really kind of open it up completely and have the Brussels sprouts appear in different chapters, in different guises, and get the readers and the cooks to understand how crucial it is that we pay the same amount of respect to the way we cook our vegetables as we do to meat.
Is there a vegetable you've tried to like but just cannot?
No, I have tried to think of a recipe that I don't, of a vegetable that I don't like, and I haven't found one yet. I think with vegetables, with fruit, it's a bit more difficult because there's some pungent fruits, Asian fruits like durian, and that are really stinky. Then it's very difficult to eat because it challenges you on various levels. levels. But vegetables, no, I haven't come across one that I really don't like. And kohlrabi, that you mentioned, is a wonderful vegetable, and I've just done a kohlrabi gratin. By the way, it was inspired by Deborah Madison, who's the goddess of vegetables in my mind. And you'd think that kohlrabi has a high water content, and the gratin is going to be watery, but in actual fact, it's fantastic. By the time you cook it with lots of wonderful cheeses, it's completely Moorish, and it's got that kind of slight bitterness that counteracts the richness of the cheese, and it's one of those wonderful things that
Cool. Well,
everyone should cook.
I want to leave time for people to get books signed, so I think that's probably a good time to break. Thanks so much for coming. Really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Michael. Thank you.